Number 3. James Stiffler. At 2:40 p.m. on May 22, 2013, 66-year-old real estate agent James Stiffler called 911. He said he caught a man burglarizing his home in Helena, Montana. He said the man came at him and he shot him. The man was no longer in his house. The police arrived in the area, and a short distance away from Stiffler's home, they encountered a car that had smashed into a fence. In the driver's seat was the dead body of a man. He was identified as 37-year-old Henry Thomas Johnson III of Helena. Stiffler cooperated with the police investigation. He said he returned home and saw a car he didn't recognize in his driveway. He had a gun in his pickup truck, so he grabbed it. As he approached the house, he saw that the front door had been smashed in. When he got inside, he saw a strange man in his home. The man was trying to go out the back door, and he told him to stop. He said the man came towards him in a threatening way, so he fired once and shot the man in the chest. The man climbed out a window and got into his car. Initially, the police said no evidence contradicted Stiffler's version of events. Johnson had been a career criminal with multiple arrests for burglary. The police believed he was responsible for 7 other recent burglaries in the area. The police continued to investigate the shooting. It turned out that the forensic evidence didn't seem to back up what Stiffler said happened. Notably, Stiffler said that Johnson came at him and he shot him in the chest. Johnson then climbed out a window. But the pathologist determined that Johnson was shot in the back under the left shoulder blade. The bullet went through his left lung and exited out his sternum. Also, a bullet was found in the driveway that had Johnson's DNA on it. So the police concluded that Johnson didn't come at Stiffler. Instead, Stiffler shot Johnson in the back as he was escaping out the window. This made the shooting a homicide and not a case of self-defense. Just less than 2 years after the shooting, on April 3, 2015, James Stiffler was charged with intentional homicide. During Stiffler's February 2016 trial, the prosecution claimed that Stiffler shot an unarmed man as he was trying to escape through a window. Stiffler's defense claimed he shot Johnson in self-defense. Stiffler legally owned the gun and had a license to carry it for over 40 years. The prosecution said that when Stiffler arrived home, saw the strange car in his driveway, saw that his door was broken down, and thought someone was in his home, he should have driven away and called the police. Stiffler testified on his own behalf. He said he went into the house with his gun because he was concerned that his wife might be in the house and she was in danger. The prosecution pointed out that Stiffler never mentioned his wife in the 911 call or in any of his initial interviews with the police. He only talked about his wife after he was charged with intentional homicide. Stiffler also told the court he didn't think that Johnson deserved to die, he was just thinking of his own safety. A firearms expert gave an explanation as to how Johnson could have been shot in the back. He said that Johnson could have turned just as the gun was pointed at him. Johnson was younger and bigger than Stiffler, who had back and knee problems that required a brace. The attacker was 15 feet away from Stiffler and could have easily overpowered him. In their closing arguments, the defense argued that it was a clear-cut case of self-defense. Johnson was in Stiffler's home and Stiffler felt threatened, so he shot him. The prosecutors argued that Stiffler was the initial aggressor and it was not a case of self-defense. The trial lasted 7 days and the jury deliberated for 11 hours. They could not come to a unanimous decision. 10 jurors voted to acquit and the other 2 had voted to convict. So a mistrial was declared. Less than 2 weeks later, the prosecution decided not to retry Stiffler and dismissed the case. Johnson's family filed a lawsuit against Stiffler a few months later. The suit was seeking damages for claims of negligence, wrongful death, and infliction of emotional distress. Stiffler's home insurance company settled the suit out of court for $20,000. Almost 5 years after Johnson's death, Stiffler continued to claim he had acted in self-defense. During a 2018 appearance at a Young Republicans meeting, Stiffler spoke about defending gun rights. Stiffler said, quote, "If I didn't have my firearm with me, I probably wouldn't be here tonight to tell you this story," unquote. The crowd only consisted of half a dozen people. Number 2. David Hillis. In August 2015, 22-year-old David Hillis lived in Akron, Ohio. On the afternoon of August 4, 2015, Hillis was at his home with his girlfriend and a friend. Around 2 p.m., several people in the neighborhood called 911 because they had heard gunshots. The police arrived on the scene. They found Hillis there with a gun. About 70 yards from his home, they found the dead body of 25-year-old Marcus Glover. He had been shot once in the head. Glover was wearing gloves and a gun was next to his body. The police asked Hillis what happened. He said that 2 men, Glover and 37-year-old Terry Tart, forced their way into his home at gunpoint. They punched, kicked, and pistol whipped him. They also ransacked his home. Hillis said he was able to grab a gun, and Glover and Tart ran from his home. He ran out to his porch and started shooting. Terry Tart was arrested later that day. Both Glover and Tart had criminal records. Glover had 3 convictions for forgery and crack cocaine possession. Tart had been arrested in 2005 for 2 robberies. In 2006, while awaiting trial, Tart broke into an apartment and held 2 people at gunpoint. He stole cash and jewelry. He kicked and beat one of the people with a shotgun. Tart served 9 years in prison for those crimes. He was released shortly before the deadly shooting, and at the time, he was under court supervision. There were many problems with Hillis's claim that it was a case of him shooting a home invader. Notably, Tart said it was not a home invasion. Hillis was a known drug dealer. Tart said that earlier that day they got some marijuana from him, but they were shorted. They returned to his home and Hillis let them into his house. They did not force their way in. They confronted him and Tart said that he punched Hillis in the face. But they didn't do anything else to him or ransack his house. Tart said that after the punch, Hillis got the gun and he and Glover fled from the house. As they ran, Hillis shot at them. Tart said it was not a home invasion. Instead, it was a drug deal that went bad. The evidence seemed to back up Tart's version of events. Hillis's home had not been ransacked. Also, Hillis had one injury, which was a cut lip. This is more consistent with the punch that Tart admitted he threw, rather than the severe beating Hillis claimed he suffered. The police checked Hillis and Tart's phone records. Shortly before the shooting, Hillis talked to a drug dealer. Then, that same drug dealer talked to Tart on the phone. This backs up that Tart and Glover were there because of a drug deal and not because of a home invasion. Another major problem is that Hillis shot at the 2 men as they were running away. Glover was shot when he was about 70 yards away from Hillis's home. He was 2 houses away from Hillis's home. So Hillis was no longer in danger, therefore he was not acting in self-defense. Akron Deputy Chief Prosecutor Craig Morgan said, quote, "Self-defense is an affirmative defense, but people have the duty to retreat when they're outside the home. The only place they don't have a duty to retreat is inside the home," unquote. So 22-year-old David Hillis was charged with voluntary manslaughter. Terry Tart was charged with aggravated burglary and murder. According to Ohio law, if someone is killed while committing a felony, any surviving accomplice can be charged with murder. Hillis's father, Michael, was outraged by his son's arrest. He said, quote, "David was in every right for fear of his life, and David reacted on his adrenaline. He acted on his reactions from what they had just done to him and traumatized him when they came into his house forcefully and stuck a gun under his throat," unquote. Michael Hillis, a retired sheriff's deputy, arrived at the scene and was ordered off the property by the police, but he refused to leave. Police officers had to tackle him before escorting him away from the crime scene. The older Hillis was charged with 4 misdemeanor crimes, including failing to comply with police, disorderly conduct, obstructing justice, and misconduct at an emergency. In September 2015, Michael Hillis pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct and was sentenced to a year probation. In August 2016, Terry Tart pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Months later, in October, he was sentenced to 9 years of prison. In November 2016, David Hillis pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 6 years of prison, but the judge suspended 5 years of his sentence. So he only had to serve 1 year in prison, then he would be released on probation. Marcus Glover's family was outraged by the sentence. They claimed that Hillis received a lighter sentence because he was a white man who shot a black man with a criminal record. Glover's family pointed out that Hillis was well connected. His father previously worked in law enforcement, and his mother previously worked for the court. Glover's family's claims of favoritism were bolstered when the judge granted Hillis a 5.5-hour pass from jail to attend his girlfriend's mother's wedding. Over a dozen of Glover's family members wrote letters to the judge urging him to keep Hillis in jail for at least that full year. However, in May 2017, after only serving 6 months of prison, Hillis was placed in a work release program. As part of the program, Hillis was to work as an electrician from 5:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Saturday and had to return to prison at night. But Hillis failed to follow the rules. He did not always attend work. Instead, Hillis visited his girlfriend and other friends' homes. On one occasion, he visited a drug house and tested positive for drugs. In October 2017, Hillis pleaded guilty to violating the terms of his work release. He was then ordered to serve the remaining 5 years of his sentence. He would have been released in 2022 if he served his entire sentence. Terry Tart is serving his sentence at the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution in Limo, Ohio. He is scheduled to be released at the end of July 2024. Number 1. Thomas Greer. In the summer of 2014, 80-year-old Thomas Greer lived in the upscale Long Beach, California neighborhood of Bixby Knolls. When he arrived home at about 9 p.m. on July 22, 2014, he discovered 2 people in his home. This was the 4th time someone had broken into his home. They were later identified as 28-year-old Andrea Miller and 26-year-old Gus Adams, who were in a relationship. They were trying to break into Greer's safe. Initially, the couple identified themselves as police officers. Then they attacked Greer, breaking his collarbone. Thinking Greer was incapacitated, Miller and Adams returned their attention back to the safe. Greer used the chance to get out of the room. He had a gate on the front door, which was locked with a padlock. At the gate was a woman with a small child. She was banging on the door, demanding to be let in. Greer went into his bedroom and got a .22 caliber revolver. He returned to his office, where Adams and Miller had broken into the safe. Adams had grabbed $5,000. Greer then started shooting at them. Adams and Miller ran out of the office and through the garage. Greer followed them and shot at them some more. Andrea Miller was shot in the back of the right knee and she fell. She managed to get up and made her way into an alley beside the garage. Greer followed her and Miller fell again. He then shot her in the back. Greer dragged her body into the garage, hoping it would lure Adams back. However, Adams just went into the alley and stole Greer's phone and gun, which he had dropped. Adams then got back into the car driven by his 49-year-old mother, Ruby Adams. She was the lookout, and she was the woman with the child who was banging on the front gate. They took off together. The police arrived on the scene, and they found 28-year-old Andrea Miller dead. Greer was taken to the hospital, where he was treated for a broken collarbone. The police interviewed him, and he was asked why he kept shooting. He said, quote, "I was just plain fucking mad, and I was going to shoot anybody and everybody," unquote. The next day, a local television station interviewed Thomas Greer. He showed no remorse for what happened. He said, quote, "The lady didn't run as fast as the man, so I shot her in the back twice. She's dead, but he got away," unquote. Then, in a mocking tone, Greer said, quote, "She says, 'Don't shoot me, I'm pregnant. I'm going to have a baby, and I shot her anyway,' unquote." An autopsy revealed that Miller was not pregnant. The night after the deadly shooting, Gus Adams was arrested and charged with murder, grand theft of a firearm, possession of a firearm by a felon, and first-degree robbery and burglary. Like Ohio, if someone is killed in the commission of a felony, their accomplice can be charged with murder. The next day, Ruby Adams was arrested. Miller and Gus Adams were known to the police. A month prior, the couple was arrested for various offenses, including extortion, embezzlement, and receiving funds under false pretenses after attempting to extort an older man out of $22,000. But the police released Miller and Adams due to insufficient evidence. Many people thought that Thomas Greer should be charged as well. He was allowed to use deadly force in his home and the immediate vicinity around his home. However, Greer chased Adams and Miller off his property into an alley. By his own admission, Greer shot Miller as she was running away. Then, as she was unarmed and injured, lying on the ground begging for her life, he shot her again in the back. Once she was incapacitated, Greer should have used the opportunity to call the police. Finally, while Miller did lie about being pregnant, Greer did not know she was lying. Upon hearing she was pregnant, he took it upon himself to execute her. However, it was decided that Thomas Greer would not face charges. Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Janet Moore wrote, quote, "Greer exercised his legal and legitimate right of self-defense when he shot and killed Andrea Miller," unquote. In 2016, Ruby Adams pleaded guilty to first-degree residential burglary, and she was sentenced to 3 years of prison. Her son, Gus Adams, went to trial in August 2016. His defense lawyer argued that Thomas Greer was responsible for the murder. Adams was acquitted of murder, but he was found guilty of burglary, elder abuse, and inflicting great bodily injury. He was sentenced to 12 years of prison. At the time of this recording, Gus Adams is not listed in the California Department of Corrections Rehabilitation online database. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.